Right, we have completed exception handling checked exception rules. I think one more rule is pending. Okay. Uh, yeah. So hope yesterday we have completed up to here. Up to here. Now, write down this. I have class example which contains superclass constructor throws interrupted exception. I am writing subclass. Okay. Now tell me, is this program compiled or not? I have written a superclass with constructor contains throws checked exception. Now I am creating subclass extends example. Is it compiled? Think. Is it compiled or not compiled? Not compiled. Why? In sample class, compiler software is adding no param constructor. Okay. Now the no param constructor implicitly calling super of no param constructor. Na? Now the super of is calling example class constructor. Example class constructor reporting checked exception. All the people understand that? So have you handled that exception? No. So compiler throwing error, unreported exception, interrupted exception must be exception in which constructor? Default constructor. Default constructor is nothing but compiler adding constructor in sample class. So tell me, what should I do? I must handle that exception in subclass. Below. I'm handling that exception here like this. Now you decide and tell me, is it compiled or not? Come on, you decide and tell me, compiled or not. So constructor and it implicitly having supercall. Supercall is superclass example class, no param constructor. It is reporting exception. That exception I handle. Any compile time error or no compile time error? No compile time error. Compile successful. Okay, na? Right. Now I am writing something like this. What happened this? I have written something like this. Is it compiled now? Take decision fast. Is it compiled? Compiled. So you didn't watch super constructor chaining, constructor super keyword points you forgot. In a constructor, super must be, in a constructor, super call must be first statement. Na? Now this is third statement. First statement, second statement, third statement. So compiler will throw error. Super must be first in the first statement. Call to super must be first statement in the constructor. So tell me, if super class constructor reporting checked exception in subclass, can you handle that exception by using try catch? No, it's not possible. So this is an important point you should remember. Now tell me, how to handle super class constructor throwing exception in subclass constructor? Only by using throws keyword. Okay, can I write like this? Can I write like this? Try super keyword. I'm writing in one statement only. This is not one statement. This is one line. Okay. You can write like this. How many statements are here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5, 5, 6, 7 statements are there. Okay. It's a one line. In one line, you can write 7 statements. Still compiler throw error. So call to the super must be first statement in the constructor. So how to handle super class constructor reporting exception? Only by using throws keyword. Tell me, along with the super class reporting interrupted exception, can I handle more checked exceptions? Can I throw some more exceptions? Can I handle more checked exceptions? Possible or not? In overriding method, while overriding method, we cannot add more checked exception. Now, in constructor, in subclass constructor, can I add more checked exceptions? Yes, possible. Why possible? Very simple point. Checked exception you are throwing in the subclass from the constructor, it is allowed because constructor is not a overriding. Na? It is subclass own constructor, right? Based on super class reporting exception, user class programmer cannot call constructor, right? Sample class object creating, sample class constructor only you have to call. When you call sample class constructor, you know what are the exceptions are throwing from this constructor, you know with the throws keyword. So in overriding method, you cannot add more checked exceptions, but whereas what do you call? But whereas in a sample class, in subclass constructor, you can add more checked exception, no problem. Okay, compile successfully because it's subclass own constructor, not overriding. Is it clear to all? Now tell me, any compile time error here now? I have example class with no param constructor, string param constructor, which throws interrupted exception. Tell me, any compile time error here? No, because it's calling default constructor calling no param constructor. And tell me, if you call explicitly super of double quotes A, then it is refers to string param constructor. String param constructor has interrupted exception. Now you will get compile time error here. As long as you are explicitly calling constructor, you have to handle that exception. Any compile time error now here? Sample class constructor contains string param constructor. Look at there. Sample class string param, example class string param matched. Based on the constructor matching, exceptions coming. No, based on the super call. Which super call is that implicitly? String parama, no parama? No param. So no compile time error, compile success. All people understand these points? Please write down these points. Already yesterday rule notes you have written. Inside subclass constructor, we cannot catch the super class constructor throwing checked exception because super call must be the first statement inside constructor. Inside subclass from its constructor logic, if some other checked exceptions are rising, we can report those exception with the comma separated along with the super class reporting checked exception because constructor is not overriding member. Okay, already written right yesterday. Write down those part. Completed? Any questions? All points are comfortable? Yes. So that's all about checked exception. One rule is there. Let us write. It's already programmatically. Yeah. Write this seventh rule. Yeah, completed. Shall we go to the next topic? Can you tell me how many types of exceptions are there? If interview ask a question, how many types of exceptions are there? What do you answer? How many types of exceptions are there? We have two types of exceptions, checked exceptions and unchecked exceptions. Tell me, throwable and exception classes, on throwable and exception classes are all rules. We have totally 7 rules. Are all 7 rules applied? No, one rule is not applied. That's why throwable and exception classes are called unchecked exception classes, right? Sorry, they're called what? Partial checked exception classes. So totally we have 3 types of exceptions. Number 1, unchecked exceptions. Number 2, checked exceptions. Actually, 2 types. To the interview, you tell 2 types of exceptions. Now the checked exceptions are divided into 2 types. Fully checked, and second one is what? Partially checked. Now it's a summary, okay? Summary on types of exceptions. Please write down along with me. Summary on types of exceptions. Java supports 2 types of exceptions, checked exceptions and unchecked exceptions. Checked exceptions again divided into 2 types, partially checked and fully checked. Yeah, error and runtime exception, all those are, you should not say like that. Exception hierarchy division means you have to tell like that, okay? Now definitions. What is unchecked exception and checked exceptions? Error and its subclasses. Runtime exception and its subclasses are called unchecked exceptions. Why? Because those exceptions, because when we throw those exceptions, compiler will not check for those exceptions handling and doesn't throw error. Next, other than error, runtime exception and their subclasses, let us write here like except error, runtime exception and their subclasses, all other exception classes means throwable, comma exception and their direct subclasses. Direct subclasses or checked exceptions. Because when we throw those exceptions, compiler checks their handling. If we don't handle either by reporting or by catching, compiler will throw error. Moreover, those exceptions moreover those exceptions are thrown by programmer explicitly by checking one condition. Because those exceptions are thrown by checking and and compiler checks its handling, those exceptions are named as checked exceptions. Understand why this name coming as checked exceptions and why they are called unchecked exceptions? Because of two reasons. We are checking and throwing, compiler checking its handling. That's why these exceptions are named as checked exceptions. Already writing or acting? Normal acting or Oscar level acting? Checked exceptions are divided into two types: partially checked and fully checked. Based on their subclasses type and based on their rules. Throwable and exception classes are partially checked exception classes and remaining all direct subclasses of throwable and exception are fully checked exception classes. When I'm talking this, I am visualizing the hierarchy diagram. Are you visualizing? When I'm talking these points, I'm visualizing the diagram, hierarchy diagram, exception handling, throwable, hierarchy diagram. Are you visualizing? Now tell me, when I say remaining all subclasses of throwable and exception are fully checked exceptions, my eyes are looking at throwable, exception, and the top most right side. And I'm not seeing error hierarchy, runtime exception class hierarchy. Remaining all subclasses I'm seeing as a direct subclasses. Okay. The exception classes, those have both subclasses and if some of the rules so many points coming, lengthy coming notes. Is it okay? These elaborated notes. If you're feeling it's lengthy, I will make it short. Make it short and what? I should delete some of the points, right? Just type complete elaborated notes. If you want short notes, what I can do? I need to delete some of the points. That is only the short, right? Mr. Chandrakanta, understand? What is a partial checked exception? The exception class which contain unchecked exceptions as a subclass is called what? Partially checked exception. Throwable and exception are partially checked exceptions because they have subclasses as error and runtime exception. That's all. What I can delete it and how can I make it shortcut? Show your English talent and talent. Baddakam, laziness. To write this much heavy notes, hands are paining, right? Mouth is paining to read. Brain is getting problem to store. Limited memory, your mind is there. Only 1 GB, 2 GB memory there. Now you are getting out of memory error. Correct? Your mind is throwing exception out of memory, heap memory filled. Heap memory full. That's why you're getting out of memory exception. Completed? Have we written fully checked exception? Okay, but the fully checked exception? The exception class, those doesn't have unchecked exception classes as subclasses. and all rules of checked exception applied, then those classes are called checked exception, fully checked exceptions, right? The exception classes, those don't have unchecked exception classes as subclass, and if all checked exception rules are applied, we call those exceptions not missing a All you completed. Shall I go next point? Right. So this is the summary on types of exceptions. Somewhere corner, you can write a diagram. Throwable. This is the object class. Is a super class of throwable. Throwable is implementing from serializable interface. Realization arrow mark means implementation arrow mark shows upper side. Generalization arrow mark shows downside, inheriting from there to here. Error, its subclasses I am writing. AE means assertion error, shortcuts I am writing. Stack overflow error. What do you call? Out of memory error. Class format error. CFE means class format error. Okay, etc. Etc. is not exception class. Okay. Here A is arithmetic exception. Arithmetic exception, array index, index out of bounds exception. Index out of bounds exception has two subclasses, array index out of bounds exception and string index out of bounds exception. Next, number format exception, null pointer exception, class cast exception, illegal argument exception, illegal state exception, etc. Input mismatch exception available in java.util package. Okay. Under exception direct subclasses, class not found exception, interrupted exception, no such field exception, no such method exception, no such field exception, no such method exception, java.io. File not found exception, java.io. IO exception, java.sql. SQL exception, java.servlet. Servlet exception, java. Yeah, enough, etc. So just mentioning here, most commonly using exception, daily exceptions you are facing. If interviewer asks a question, can you list off the common exceptions you face? Give me some of the exceptions you come across. And I just tell this list enough, more than enough. You know, if you give more knowledge also, it creates problem. You will not get job. Understand? If you give more knowledge, interviewer get a doubt. This fellow has so much knowledge, he will not work with my company. Always remember, you should give how much necessary, that much only knowledge. For example, you wanted to give food to a kid. Okay, now 5 years kid. You cannot give chicken biryani, mutton biryani to him. He cannot, right? Like that, company also same story. In company, I have so much of knowledge, so you cannot give complete knowledge to the interviewer. Interviewer will not select you. Feeling that this person is having so much of knowledge, he will not be with my company. I have to search again new developer. Don't select him. So based on the company standards, company level, you have to check and give the answers. Be careful. You know, so many students are rejected because of more knowledge. Sometimes my students are facing that problem also. So be careful. Error, runtime exception, these are called unchecked exceptions. World map is coming up. Yeah, really, I'm not joking, buddy. Really, people are rejected because of more knowledge. You should not give, you should not answer all 100, let's say 10 questions they have asked. If you answer all 10 questions, you'll reject. You must give answers based on the company standards. What is the standard of that company? How much knowledge the company is expecting, you should guess before going into company. Accordingly, you should give answers. Less knowledge rejecting is obviously, that's true, na? No need to tell, right? Even more knowledge people also rejected. Now this is the most dangerous fellow. Okay, hope diagram is clear. Yeah, until 2022 people coming, 19 people considered as a freshers. Okay. Okay, now let us try to see Where can I find all these points? Okay, some microsystem documentation. JDK 16 API documentation. All people know API documentation? And then type here throwable. Superclass of all classes throwable. Superclass of all exception throwable, not error exception. Remember. Now look at there. It is subclass of object implementing all interfaces serializable, non subclasses error and exception. Public class throwable extends object implementing serializable. The throwable class is the super class of all errors and exceptions in Java language. Only objects that are instances of this class or one of its subclasses are thrown by the Java virtual machine or can be thrown by the Java throw statement. Similarly, only this class or one of its subclasses can be argument type in catch class. Okay, for the purposes of compile time checking of exceptions, for the purposes of compile time checking of exceptions, throwable and any subclasses of throwable that is not also subclass of either runtime exception or error are regarded as what exceptions? Checked exceptions. For the purposes of compile time checking of exceptions, throwable and any subclasses of throwable that is not also subclass of either runtime exception error are regarded as checked exceptions because they are compile time checking purpose. Now very important point you should write here. Very important point you need to write here. Can we call checked exceptions are compile time exceptions? The most danger point, many faculties and students are confusing. Can we call checked exceptions as or compile time exceptions? As a question, dummy wrong question. How can you say compile time exceptions? Compile time errors will be there. How compile time exceptions will be there? Can we call checked exceptions as compile time exceptions? What the answer? Yes or no? No? Answer, no. At the compilation time, we will get only errors, syntax errors. We will get exceptions only at runtime because of either wrong inputs or because of wrong values, wrong logic. Checked exceptions are checked by compiler. If they are not handled, compiler will throw error. It is syntax mistake. Not handling checked exception is also considered as syntax mistake and compiler throws error. Unreported exception must be caught up through. So please don't be go under trap of this error mistake, okay? If any of your friends are telling that checked exceptions are compile time exceptions, ask them, what the definition of exception? Ah, exception is a runtime error. Then slap them. How dare you to call checked exceptions are compile time errors? Compile time exception. Hey, don't slap Ray. I'm just joking. Are you ready, na? Okay, instances of two classes, error and exception, are conventionally used to indicate that exceptional situations has occurred. Typically, these instances are freshly created in the context of the exceptional situation so as to indicate relevant information such as stack trace data. A throwable contains a snapshot of execution stack of its thread at the time of it was created. Remember the meaning? A throwable contains means the exception object contains a snapshot of means the method is called from which method, starting point to the exception raised point, complete flow. M1, M2 main. Have you seen when exception propagation coming, when we catch exception, E dot stack trace when it is play, we got message what M1, M2, M3, M4, like all methods declaration. That is called a throwable object contains a snapshot of the execution stack of its thread at the time of its created. It can also contain a message string that gives more information about the error. Over time, a throwable can suppress other throwables from being propagated. Finally, the throwable can also contain a cause, another throwable that caused this throwable to be constructed. Are you understanding these words? After exception, now exception handling chapter completed, okay? Exception handling chapter completed. Now I'm just trying to show you all the points from where I collected and explained. These are all the points I collected from this document only, okay? So when I'm reading these points, your mind should not feel difficulty, okay? All words and statements should come to your mind. The recording of this casual information is referred to as exception, chained exception facility. I told you, storing one exception object in another exception object and throwing both together is nothing but exception chaining. Okay, as the cause can itself have a cause and so on, leading to a chain of exception, each caused by another. Okay, one exception can cause another exception. That exception chaining. You can write only not one exception, exception in exception. Again, these two exception, another exception. Again, these three exception in another exception. You can chain and throw. One reason that a throwable may have a cause is that the class that throws its built uh, a lower layer abstraction, nothing but superclass subclass. When we have to develop abstraction overriding, okay, and an and then operation on upper layer fails due to failure in the lower layer, it would be bad design to let the throwable thrown by the lower layer propagated upward, as it is a generally unrelated to the abstraction provided by the upper layer. Okay, they are talking very high level. Further doing so, we would tie the API of the upper layer to the details of the implementation, assuming the lower layers exception was a checked exception. Throwing a wrapped exception, that is an exception contained in a cause, allows the upper layer to communicate to the details of the failure to its caller without incurring either of these shortcomings. There is a lot of technical words are there, okay, and we simplified. Tell me, I given a statement, Java learning is simplified by HK. Simplified, all points I'm covering in a simple manner, right? It preserves the flexibility to the change, the implementation of upper layer without changing its API. Okay, it's called superclass subclass overriding. The second reason that throwable may have a cause is that the method that throws it must conform a general purpose interface that doesn't permit the method to throw the cause directly. For example, suppose a persistent collection conforms the collection interface that it possesses blah 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 thing. Okay, this also comes under overriding. A cause can be associated with throwable in two ways: via constructor that takes the cause as an argument, or via init cause throwable method. There are two ways we can create exception chaining. I have shown you via constructor, new runnable of exception via constructor. Okay, already exception object is there. Now I want to store the cause in this exception object. Then you can use what? Init cause throwable method. New throwable classes that wish to allow causes to be associated with them should provide constructor that take a cause and delegate to one of the throwable constructors to take the cause. Because the init cause method is public, it allows the cause to be associated with any throwable, even a legacy throwable whose implementation predicts the addition of the exception chaining. Okay, tell me, yesterday we have written new class not found exception. Class not found exception doesn't have constructor to take a cause object. Then if you want to throw class not found exception, not new runtime exception, new runtime exception, you can use what method? Init cause method. Okay, after catching the class not interrupted exception, create the exception class not found exception object, and now you store this cause by using which method? Init cause method. Will you try this method yourself? By convention, every exception class throwable and its subclasses have two constructors. One that takes no argument and other takes string argument. Can you tell me? No argument constructor will create exception object without error message. String parameter constructor create exception message with detailed error message. Okay, now further those subclasses that might likely have cause associated with them should have two more constructors. One take throwable, another take as a string the detailed exception and throwable the cause. Okay, now try to answer. If you wanted to create a subclass from throwable class, how many constructors you should guarantee? Two constructors compulsory, no param constructor and string param constructor. And if you want to support exception chaining, then you should also define throwable parameter constructor. If you want to support exception chaining with error message, then throwable with string error message. Okay, na? If you want to know more about compile time checking exceptions, you can click this link and you can read it. Compile time checking exceptions. Okay, so if you want to read more details, you can read. I don't want to read all the details. So this is exception handling chapter complete paragraph. Okay, na? Right. So let us go for 15 minutes break. Let us take 15 minutes break, and we will come back and we'll learn custom exceptions and other points. Okay, how to create custom exception, how to develop project, we will try to understand. Is it clear to all? So we will meet back by 9:15 with the same link. Okay, I'm not closing this link. You just leave the link and join by 9:15 after tiffin. Okay.